Hello and welcome to episode 64 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. This week we'll go back and have a look at the pretty deplorable effort against the Hawks down in Tassie. Have a quick look at Peel having a good win against East Fremantle in the Waffle, and then we'll have a look at the upcoming clash against the Blues on Saturday night. Joining us is our usual resident Victorian expert, Seppo. How are you, mate?
Good afternoon or good evening, depending what time you're listening to and wherever around Australia. And it's interesting circumstances we just witnessed on Sunday. It's worst loss under Ross Lyon so far for Freo, which is hard to watch.
Yeah, in the end, the game was 17 goals, 13, 115 to 6 goals, 743, 72-point loss. And reality was that certainly after quarter time, Freo never really looked in at Seppo. And what were your thoughts on the game? Any thoughts on it?
Not much other than, I suppose, the fact that we didn't pick up too much injuries. I know, I think Clancy Pearce got subbed out with little bit of a knock, but it's just amazing that the way that we played was just outgunned and outclassed by the Hawks. And you think, well, we matched them with it last year, how much has actually changed? And we've had a good look at the Hawks all year, so you think they'd have a fairly good idea of what they were going to do. And even just Ross mentioned the press conference that, they thought they were going to do things and they did it, yet we couldn't combat it. So that's worrying that they planned for it, but the players out there couldn't actually turn it into at least a contest, because for a while it seemed like we were close, but they just took it away in the third. And as I mentioned before, this is probably the only time under Ross Lyon that I've actually switched off from a game that my attention shifted and I haven't actually been 100% focused out there on the result. I'm sure it might have been the case of the players, because it's a hard game to watch right the way through, and I'd be a brave Freo supporter if you actually sat there and watched every minute of that game.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, I don't think you can take too much in probably the last quarter and a half, Seppo, really. Like, if you looked at the way, like you could see Ross Lyon was obviously trying different rotations. I think in the last quarter, there was no Lockie Neal, there was no Fife, there was no Mundy in the middle. They were sort of rotating different blokes through to see how they go, but that doesn't take away from the excuse that they were monstered in the first quarter and a half. One of the things that's been interesting, I think, since probably in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and obviously having Johnson going out has hurt us. Not just his ability to read the play, but just the way we seem to be rolling back a lot further, Seppo. I don't know if it's just me noticing it, but we seem to be rolling a lot deeper into our defensive 50, and whether that's to protect Pearce a little bit, who actually I thought was probably one of our shining lights on the day, but we seem to be rolling back a lot further. And then when we get the ball, we've got no one to kick to, or we're not using the ball effect. And I know they've talked about ball use, but we're not actually running and spreading like we were in the first few weeks of the season. And I think, and we'll get to the changes a little bit later this week, but I think it's going to be good to have some extra run through that middle. And I'm hoping that by, I see Sutcliffe's back in, but Crozier, but they might be able to at least get a bit more run back through the middle. Because it just seems that when we get the ball, we've got nowhere to go when we've actually got the turnover, because all our guys are pumped so far into the defensive 50.
Yeah, I suppose it's not a lot of the forwards' faults, and I know our forward lines looks kind of differently. We haven't exactly settled about, where Pav's playing and if it's Clark or whoever else, taller, if Main, now how far up the fields he's playing. A lot of people talking about the positioning of where Ballantyne and Walters have been, whether up the ground suits them or closer to goal to Crumb, because even just looking at the positioning of when the ball did go forward, there was moments where Gibson and someone else taller, I don't know if it's Stratton, would be kicking to Ballantyne and he would be crammed between the two, and they wouldn't even kick it to his vantage to, run onto it. They'd just be kicking to the target, and you could sort of see it unfolding before the kick was even delivered that, they're trying to do the team thing and maybe put it to the hot spot, but it seemed a bit of stupid ball movement, and it was a bit frustrating. And I suppose one of the only positives in terms of a player performance, like you mentioned, Alex Pearce, it's probably one of the best 9-possession games we've probably had from a player recently. I suppose Walters is probably good with, and Hill probably can be very damaging off a small amount of touches. But for Alex Pearce to show a bit of confidence, operate about 90% again and go up there. And I think there was a couple of times where it probably won't, go against his record, but you can see he was hungry and going for the ball, but he'd be spoiling McFarlane or Sandilands or someone else tall that was, really had a clear crack at the ball and it was spilling out and it just sort of fell. The ball actually just came out of our players' hands and fell into the laps of the Hawks players. And, from a sniff at it, they just seem to be able to convert from a step and a second with the ball. So can't afford to do that against really good sides like them. And I wish we can do it to them because we certainly burned the ball a bit and they, as Ross says, stripped it and we fumbled and it made it really easy for the Hawks to score.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that other point as well, Steph, I think part of the flow-on effect is with Johnson out, they've had to bring Hill back into the defensive 50 as well. So they're trying to use him a little bit more in that back half to create and open up the field a little bit. And Sutcliffe hasn't been like he was last year in terms of spreading the ball. And so we had Clancy down there, and Lockie Neal tends to get a lot of his possessions when he's not in a clearance situation in that back 50 or across the half back line. And those two guys, they tend to be very careful with the ball and very stagnant, or they're just moving sideways. So giving those teams, I've been critical of Johnson in the past as well for his kicking, but he took risks at times, and so did even Sutcliffe, where if they paid off, they opened the field up. And the reality is we're not getting any goals. If you think back to the first 6 or 7 weeks, Seppo, we were getting a lot of goals from midfield.
Mm.
And now, when was the last? You don't see Daniel Pearce really getting forward of 50. Stephen Hill certainly isn't. Fife didn't get on the scoreboard last week. We're just not getting any value from our midfield either in terms of kicking goals. And I think that was the difference early in the season. Why we improved our scoring average by that 2 to 3 goals was the fact that our midfielders were contributing on the scoreboard, and they haven't been doing that the last few weeks. Just pushing.
Yeah, I suppose with that midfield movement and how quick that ball movement was, everyone talked pre-season about how our focus was on quick ball movement and being direct and going through the middle and some of those 45-degree kicks. You haven't seen a lot of it recently, and I just think a passage of play earlier in the year when you said Johnson was there or Sutcliffe was having a good patch, that it'd be those daring kicks up the midfield, but they were hitting the targets, it was opening it, and we'd get coast-to-coast goals with probably about 3 or 4 possessions running up the middle. And even Daniel Pearce was part of that when he was not so fumbly and had a pretty good accurate kick and getting a good metres gain. But at the moment, the kicks aren't exactly going where they need to be, and even just the possessions, they aren't clean possessions. And I don't know if it's a bit of the conditions. They've got to play some part of it, but let's just hope. I hear there's more rain on the way, or chance for this game against Carlton coming up. But certainly it didn't look too bad down there in Tasmania, but certainly guys need a lift and get a bit cleaner and quicker with the ball movement.
Yeah. What did you think of the move before the match, bringing Taberner out? Do you think it was a bit of Ross Lyon sort of not wanting to show anything? Do you think it was... it didn't look like there was any rain on, and there certainly wasn't any rain in the game.
Mm. Well, I got excited when I actually heard the news pre-match. I'm like, good, it's raining. They're going to make the change, bring Mzungu in. This is going to be good for him. And then you kind of had a look at the conditions, and it's, well, I don't know if we would have been better off with Taberner out there. It's all sort of hindsight, but you just think the way the game played would have, Main be better, further, down back or out there, and maybe it would have been a decision to play maybe Taberner and Mzungu and leave Main out and have that type of a mix, because certainly Mzungu probably wasn't the best out there, but for a couple of moments he did all right there.
Yeah, and it was and the biggest concern obviously would have been the fact that even though Sandilands was getting a lot of the hit-outs, we were certainly getting stripped, as you said, Seppo, and we just haven't been able to take advantage of those. And teams are obviously stopping Fife and our guys moving through the ball. And it was interesting this week that Ross Lyon was talking about going to the AFL and getting clarification on certain tactics that are being used against him. The other one I probably want to see a bit more is I'm still baffled half the time about the free kicks that Sandilands gets given against him. He seems to every week get 2 or 3 free kicks against him because he's taller or bigger or out muscling them. I just can't work it out sometimes. It's really bizarre the way they...
And going the other way, he doesn't get the free kicks he deserves with, the other ruckman, especially a smaller target against him, seems to have a bit of latitude with how much he can actually throw their arms or chop his arms or, get a good hold of him. Yet the second that Sandilands puts it the other way, it's a free kick against. And I think it was one game earlier the year where they finally played one of those ones we've been screaming for. And I thought that was a sign of things to come. But I think it might have just been, rule of the week or someone's highlighted it to the AFL and all of a sudden they've got to focus on that one thing to appease the masses. And now it's gone back to the old ways. So hopefully they are looking at that, and Sandlands can get the free kicks deserves.
Yeah, and no, there's a good chance for them to come back out this week and switch on. And it's probably a bit disappointing. You would have thought Ross Lyon, and I know they've made a few changes this week, but I'm sure he would have, even if it was a competitive loss last week, it would have been able to make a couple of more changes for the right reasons rather than sort of for the dropping. And we'll get to those in a little bit of time. But it's certainly going to give us a bit of food for thought between now and the end of the season, Seppo, about where we sit in the grand scheme of it. And at the end of the day, I know people talk about our poor record against Hawthorn, but 6 out of the last 7 we've played them away from home, and we have beaten them the only time we have played them at home in that span. And if we can still maintain that top spot or top 2 spot, then
could make the difference.
Could make the difference. You got playing on your home turf. That's what you're playing for. So. And the way the fixture rolls out this week with us playing Carlton and then the Hawks and Sydney, both of them can't win this week, and even the Collingwood West Coast game will be a pretty tough one for West Coast, who are only a game behind as well. So
yeah, if we get a win, we're getting room on one of those other top 4 contenders. So it's 8-point games for them, and we've just got to get the result done and continue on, because we only really get the chance to play West Coast from now on. We've played Hawks and Sydney and played Collingwood, so we don't have a chance to put any say into where they finish. It's all up to them, and we've just got to keep on doing the job from here on, and that derby is going to be an absolute cracker in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, and like last year, Seppo, we seem to have a ruckman come in and just like Reece Stanley did last year, and even last week Ben McAvoy came in, hasn't played all season, and had a blinder in the first half and taking grabs everywhere, kicking goals, and
yeah. Oh, going back on it now, you just remind me about people kicking goals. It's great to see that Alex Pearce actually kept Gunston to absolute donuts, which is, I didn't think he was even out there for the moment. And then I was trying to work out who Pearce was playing on, and to see that he kept Gunston to not even a behind is bloody fantastic, because that's probably the lowest time that Gunston's ever gone without probably even a shot on target for a game. So
I can't remember the last time he would have had one. It's been few and far between, that's for sure. And
yeah,
in saying that, he did have a goalless game, I think, against Adelaide this year, but there hasn't been, or didn't get any score against Adelaide, but that been once, I think, in the last 2 years. So it's a fantastic effort, and certainly shows that realistically we don't need to put any of our free agency money, I don't think, in key defenders.
Yeah.
I think we've certainly got to look at something in the front half, but with Silvani and Dawson still to come, Johnson out, and Pearce's development, I don't think we need to look at any of our free agency cash going towards our key defender at this stage, that's for sure.
And I suppose that's one good thing you can think about the injuries that we're forced, and like a lot of people saying, if Silvani and Dawson and Johnson weren't injured, we probably wouldn't be looking at Alex Pearce playing for these last couple of weeks. And by doing so, we've exposed him. We've shown him what's required at the top pace. And if those other guys come back into the side and he goes back to Peel, at least he's going to be better for the experience, and probably keeps him hungry to keep pressure on that main spot. And Luke McFarlane's not going to be around there forever, but there could be a potential spot for him in the future if it's not a combination of those other 3 that aren't out there. So I know, and him and probably Tanner Smith and Vanderloo are probably all sort of looking for an opportunity at the back line, but that's one that I think Alex Pearce has taken over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the other 2 are definitely a fair couple of rungs below Pearce at the moment, the way things sit. But it'll be definitely interesting to test Ross Lyon's mantra where you play yourself in, play yourself out, because Pearce has really done very little wrong in his time since he's come into the side. He certainly doesn't give us the creativity off the half-back line that Johnson does, and his ability to play.
How do you go to McFarlane and say, oh, by the way, Alex Pearce is doing well, Johnson and Dawson have come back, sorry, Luke, you're going to have to sit it out. It'll be like that vision of him when he was given the red vest against... was it the Eagles or GWS or something?
Well, exactly, yeah. So, But it'll be interesting when he comes back whether they decide to stay
All three.
with all three, and because Pearce tends to be that player who plays a bit like Dawson did. He doesn't try and do anything more than his job. He'll sit there, he'll play on the guy, he'll do everything you get asked of him. He's obviously a little bit better kick than Dawson.
He's got
So it'll
more
be interesting to
confidence with
see
the
when.
ball. He's not stopping and turning and doing a Sandlands and looking a handball off behind him. He's confident to move. So it might be even a good combination to see if we can go Alex Pearce, McFarlane and Johnson when he comes back.
Well, exactly, and then that allows Ibbotson, because Ibbotson can then play either the third tall, and then it leaves Johnson to play free, or you can play Johnson free and then leave Ibbotson to play as the roam, and both of those players play the position well. So it'd be interesting to see when they come back whether they decide to go with the three talls, because Johnson plays a bit quicker than, or a bit shorter than he actually is in terms of his ability to run and move the ball out. So it'll be something the match committee would be thinking about, you'd think, for sure.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's enough of that one, Seppo?
Yeah, let's move on to the Peel game, where there was a lot better result for the reserves.
Yeah, Peel ended up winning 14 goals, 892, defeating a wasteful East Fremantle 8 goals, 1866 at Bendigo Bank Stadium. And probably the highlight of the game, or probably the highlight out of this game, Seppo, was the performance of Ed Langdon. He looks like he's going to be a really handy player for us, and if you can see him developing in a year or two and playing that sort of role that Clancy Pearce is playing at the moment, but he's got more pace and good use of the ball, and I don't think it's going to be too long before we see a debut from him at some point, whether it be this year or next year. He's definitely got some really good quality about him.
Well, for a start, he's wearing the right number, 26. It must be something about that jumper, with Clive and Kep before him. We just have to call him Ed. That number 26 is renowned for their first name. One of those players continue the tradition, and you just have to look at his brother that's playing for Collingwood and how well he's played a couple of years into the system now. And he seems to possess a couple of the similar qualities, and to rack up 34 touches, and I think he even kicked a goal himself on the weekend, was really good to see, because I think everyone's been talking about Connor and Lockie Weller recently with good solid week-on-week performances, but now after having that injury out of the side a bit, Ed's starting to come along, and it's a lot harder to get midfield opportunities. It's not like Alex Pearce, where it's been given a shot in the side, and it might be another full year before Ed makes his debut, but at least we're starting to see good development from not just one, two, it's sort of three of our first three picks from the draft last year.
Yeah. The other one who went back last week and obviously had a pretty good performance was Sutcliffe, who got 30 touches and with 17 kicks, and he looked quite good and played a little bit more up the ground, where he had a few inside 50s and that sort of thing. And it was interesting to see this week, Seppo, that out of the 4 or 5 guys that were named best for Peel, that 3 of those guys got a call up this week. So it does show that they are trying to reward a little bit of waffle form there.
Yeah, except for Ballard, that always seems to be in the best, but
Yeah.
can never seem to make it in there, obviously coming off the rookie list. But it is great to see at least Crozier, and I think that's something we really lacked for his sort of quick ball movement and the way. I just love his set shot routine. He's got a dead eye for the footy and pumped 4 inside 50s in from the stats there for Hayden. And my young man Brady Gray's done all right as well with another 23 touches. And I obviously didn't watch the game. I don't know the position of where he racked them up, but from what I hear from the reports, he's going in tough, he's going in hard, and if we need that hard edge again, that's we talked about last week as a potential inclusion for the game against the unsocial Hawks. If we want someone to go in hard, we haven't been having that with a subdued Ballantyne. Probably been told to not go in hard, and no Crowley out there. It'd be great to see someone like Gray come in and provide a bit of body, because he certainly goes in hard.
Yeah, I think the only thing that really hurts Gray at the moment is he does tend to turn the ball over a little bit too much.
As bad as Ballard?
Just different. Like Ballard's an accumulator, and he sort of plays that Michael Barlow role, where Gray is very tough, and it'll be good to see if Gray could actually do it at the next level because he would be that small defender, and that would free up Sheridan or Sutcliffe to move back up into the wing and give us a little bit more run through the midfield. But he just tends to like sometimes turn it over. But he has got flexibility in that he can probably play down back, and he has been doing a little bit of a run through role at Peel, like probably a bit like Clancy was, Seppo, where he played on Boak earlier in the year. Um, he certainly can't fault his toughness, that's for sure. So I think if he does a couple more, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they give him a chance. And with that defence, I think they're probably going to try and settle it down as much as they can. They just need to work on the forward line. Good to see Hurley get a couple more goals as well, Seppo. So he seems to be enjoying it much more up forward than the role. He's certainly a much better forward than a backman.
It's amazing now. He's had 6 league games and he's kicked 4 goals. And I wouldn't think, obviously, he started off back for a couple, but the fact that they've tried him forward and he's now starting to kick it and got on the scoreboard a couple of times now is fantastic to see. And they call him the Ox down at the club. And gee, if it's another avenue to goal that we've been looking for, he doesn't exactly have that key position height, but 193 is not to be sneezed at these days, especially if they're built well.
Yeah, and he certainly looks natural. He can run to the ball. He knows when to go, and I think that's going to be these sort of. If he does have a future with the club, and I think he certainly will get at least another year next year. Playing forward will be where it'll be.
And you can't really knock his kicking action because I suppose you just have to look at the Irish players that are out there, and Zach Tui and Pierce Hanley and some of the other guys that are out there that don't exactly have the normal standard technique, but they certainly can kick the ball and they go in tough, the other guys. So
it's come a long way, Seppo, though.
His kicking, obviously, it was a lot questionable when we first saw him having a kick around with a footy in the pre-season, but it's, like I say, come a long way. And if he can just continue to rack up numbers and kick some goals, there may be a place for him in the future just off the rookie list.
Yeah, he's definitely developed. And the other one who probably had one of his better games last week was DeLuca as well. Along with Blakey and Weller, who's been pretty consistent most of the year. And as first-year players, as our draftees, you certainly couldn't fault anything they've done. And it would have been nice to maybe give one of them a chance this week. I thought they might have given one of those guys a bit of a run, but I think just the fact that our ball movement has been so poor the last few weeks, Seppo, I think Ross Lyon will be trying to get our best team playing and getting it back to that position where we were sort of seeing a little bit more of what we saw in the first 6-7 weeks of the year as opposed to the last 6 or 7 weeks. So
yeah, I really see it in terms of those first year players. No matter how well they're doing, they've obviously got to bed down the Freo game plan and they've really got to honour the people that have been in the side, like Crozier and Sutcliffe, and there's a lot of quality sitting outside that obviously their performance. I don't hold any precedence over the other guys, or have photos of Ross or something that everyone jokes about that they seem to keep on getting games. But I'd rather see someone, especially that they've proven that can play well, and back him in to say, well, Sutcliffe back at his best and Crozier back at his best. A handy addition to our side, and providing the changes are right for the people we're pulling out. Let's see those guys in there. Providing then we start to get injuries, that's when we can probably have a look at what we've got with Expose and get guys like Langdon and Weller in there. And I suppose if we go over and have a look at the team names, we'll get a bit of fair idea of what we've done and who's even made the emergency list.
Yeah, so do you want to bring us the ins and outs for this week, Seppo?
Yeah, we'll go to the Fremantle side playing home to Carlton on Saturday night. We've got into the side Griffin, Taberner, Sutcliffe and Crozier. Like you said, 4 of the best named for Peel, with 4 omissions, no injuries, even though Clancy Pearce did get subbed out with his injury. You've got Duffield, Mzungu, Pearce and Clark all omitted there. And looking at the emergencies for Freo, Clark's in there, as long as Weller and Langdon. So after their good games, they've obviously been it's a nice little reward or recognition to be named there on the emergency list there, and you never know, the opportunity still might come for one of them. If I'm not sure if Clark will be the game day emergency, but at least for Weller and Langdon to maybe kit up, at least run out with the guys and warm up with them, maybe a good opportunity for them to at least just see what goes into the preparation. Might starve them. I don't know when the Peel game's on. It might starve them an opportunity to put their hand up again next week, but at least it's a home game. They might be able to do both. Moving over to Carlton, we're looking at into the side Doherty, Rowe, and Walsh, who's, I believe, an old Peel player from WA. And they lose, really unfortunate, Gibbs out with a pectoral muscle. Cam Wood there, second ruckman omitted, and Dennis Armfield's out with a broken arm, I believe. So, and also Tom Fields is playing his second game. He's at full back from the reserve sides that can launch I think it's an 86-meter torpedo or something. He basically took a goal from a goal kick in from the top of the square and basically hit the centre circle and went past it with a massive torp. So he's a really long kick, Tom Fields.
Yeah, but not just once, but twice. And
Mm.
I used to watch his old man play a little bit when I was a kid, I think. So it'll be certainly interesting. And a couple of big, I mean, Gibbs will be a big out for Carlton. And Armfield's pace would probably be very handy on Subiaco, but probably more looking at, and good to see Brad Walsh, who was the WA captain last year, Seppo, in the for the Peels or for the WA under 18s at the for the national championships, and good to see him get a debut at home as well.
Mm.
But Griffin kicked 3 goals last week, Seppo, and obviously those 3 goals were probably the difference between him getting a call up this week and giving him a chance. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to translate that form that he showed at Peel into the AFL. Like, he had a couple of years ago before he did his ACL, he was looking $1 million, and then unfortunately he got the ACL. Came back last year and played St Kilda, and we just looked completely ordinary that day. And Reece Stanley had a day out, and that was the end of it. So it'll be interesting to see if he does take his chance, especially after signing a 2-year contract this year as well.
Yeah, I suppose we haven't seen the best of Griffin ever since that probably game in the wet. Remember where he kicked that good goal from the boundary against Richmond at the G a couple of years ago, and I remember he used to be good for a goal or two and at least provide a target up forward and a good chop out for Sandy. So it's quite interesting, obviously, where they're going to position with and him, because I really don't trust Griffin to shoulder the most of the load and run around the ground. Obviously, he's got Cruiser out there who's starting to get back to his best form because he's been out of the game a long time and only had a couple of games this year to get back into it. And obviously, I think Rowe they're probably going to use for a chop out, or even Lockie Henderson into the ruck, and Tom Bell as well. So there's some other, taller lights that Griffin will have to come up against. And I think if we can keep him in the forward line and give Pav a bit of a chop out, provide forward target, it's going to be good for him, and maybe a chance to force Clark to stay in the seconds for another week and really push back and not just come straight back into the side.
Yeah, the big talking point probably all week on the board has been, oh, it certainly will be tomorrow as well, I think, Seppo, is the choice between Mzungu, Subin, De Boer. Those 3 players they're all very similar types in terms of they're pretty hard at it.
Been in and out of the side all this year, some
Yeah.
have at the vest. So, yeah, it's an interesting, obviously, a mission with Duffield and Mzungu out. I don't know if I certainly don't have fond memories for the game last year, but I can't remember if it's probably their kicking efficiency or decision making probably led to their omissions. But I think rather than looking at their omissions, I suppose some people had to come out, but I'm just glad, really looking at the ins, that we've actually got Crozier and Sutcliffe back in. So, and it's interesting, obviously, with Taberner. If you consider Griffin and Taberner as 2 talls in, we've only really dropped Clark. So we're actually going a bit taller and haven't actually seen the full weather forecast. I saw someone mention that there's a 40% chance of a bit of rain. So you don't know, maybe there's a chance that Taberner might come back out, and maybe Langdon or Weller might get a chance. But it'd be interesting to see if we're saying we're actually go a bit taller, do something to our structures, get Taberner running up and down the field with planting Griffin there, and get Pav sticking to what he does best. And maybe it will fix our forward line, or maybe even just open up our forward options and at least have someone else other than an outmanned Ballas and Main on the wing trying to compete hard.
Yeah, I just had a quick look at the forecast, Seppo, and it looks like it's going to be cloudy on Saturday. It'll rain on Sunday, but they've said 0% chance this time.
Oh, that's better. It's cleaned up. Obviously, we're closer to the mark. But if we, have a dry game, it'll be great to see Tabs back out there, and hopefully his last few games where he hasn't performed well have been really bad for him. And I think the kicking to him hasn't been at best. And you look at those early games in the year where he's kicking a couple of goals a game, is Yeah, it's when we were doing really well, and even just the way he competes for a marking contest on the wing showed that he can do that, get a good couple of marks, and hopefully helps us improve our structures and kicking.
Yeah. What do you think of the? They've obviously put De Boer and Subin in the starting side. So do you think it's going to be? You have to think Sutcliffe or Crozier will be the sub. And I know they have changed it a little bit. It doesn't necessarily mean that the guys line up the way they line up, or one of those four interchanges is going to be the sub.
I
But
think
is
90% of the times this year, unless we've had a late change, the subs pretty much come from the last spot on the interchange. So unless something happens, it could be crazy. It's kind of a bit unfortunate. There's probably a lot of people that are going to whinge going, yeah, that's what we needed out there. Give Crazy a full game. And I suppose if he does start and he goes quiet, he'll probably be the first one to come off. But I think that has been the case a couple of times this year. But yeah, it's a bit harsh on him. And it would like, I don't know whoever needs the rocket more out of Subin or De Boer, but there'd been other contenders, as we've talked about. They have had it before. So I'm not fussed. I'll let them make the right call on the day, and I'll be happy with either. I know Subin's done a bit when he's come on and provided a bit of kicking, but it hasn't been too bad. And I think he made a couple of silly mistakes like everyone else on the weekend, but I'll be happy with either of them. Only when they come on that they compete hard, get a couple of tackles, and push the ball forward.
Yeah, the other interesting one will be, I think, if we have a look at it, is like Barlow's played forward most of the year, Seppo, and he hasn't really been much in the centre bounces. And I thought they might have rotated him a little bit more through the middle in the second half of the season, but for some reason he just doesn't seem to be getting any sort of time in certainly in the centre clearances or anything like that, which was his bread and butter in the first couple of years at the club. So it'd be interesting to see if they try and stay with him in that role in that forward line, considering our forwards have been struggling to kick goals.
Yeah, it's a funny, even just having a look at his positioning, he's started on the edge of the box almost like a winger at the start for the centre bounces and sort of drifts in and sits on the outside of the pack. So he's playing this odd sort of half forward flanker slash winger almost that comes in and tries to play on the outside, but he just doesn't have that leg speed. So
Yeah, he doesn't have the
I
leg
still
speed,
can't, I
and
can't work out exactly what type of position they're playing in because he's certainly not a hit up or even sitting in the forward 50. He's sort of sitting on the edge, like trying to get involved, but don't go too deep on ball. And I'd love it if you could see when he was back to his best. He was actually in amongst it, getting his hands free, dishing it off to some other guys. Like I'd almost prefer to see Fife on the outside bit and get Barlow in there dishing it out to Fife rather than the other way around because it certainly it seems a bit hard on Barlow because I don't think he's been played in his best position. But at the moment, I couldn't even describe the position he's been played in.
yeah, and as you said, his leg speed's not. I mean, no one said he's super quick, and his ball use isn't. He's not a brilliant kick either. It's not like
He's
he
a
throws.
brilliant handball.
Yeah, and in the middle, and it'd just be good to see maybe they try and put him back in the middle a little bit more, and even if you use Lockie Neal a bit more on the outside, or because Lockie's not at least a bad kick, or have someone a little bit more penetrating in that role, and it'd be good even if they had Crozier playing in that type of position where, and I know he hasn't done a lot this year, but the times he's had the ball, he's been quite creative when he's got that ball around that half forward role, and he's created a few goals, and he just gives you a little bit of X factor, and he's a pretty strong mark. A couple of weeks ago, he took some brilliant marks in the first quarter at full pace, bringing it out and leading it out, and just good to see him maybe play in that role a little bit more and put Barlow back where he plays his best footy.
Mm.
Anything else you want to really see this week, Seppo, for the game?
Oh, it's obviously the focus is going to go on to when you look at Carlton's best. They've probably got Cade Simpson and Cripps out there as two of their best, and Mark Murphy's out there still, but still not as damaging as what Simpson and Cripps can be. So a bit of focus on the young guys that we haven't had to worry about before. I know they're missing a lot of talent out there, but it's going to be quite interesting to see how our midfield can go against, from going from the Hawks with some really, quality talent, even the way they move the ball. I remember there was some stat that Ross mentioned about the backwards kicks from the Hawks. There was actually quite a few, so it's not all about just going forward, but just making smart decisions. And I'm not sure if you look at the Carlton players, there's a lot of smart decisions of the footy when the ball's in those guys' hands. So hopefully we can put a bit of pressure on and win, not just get that Sandy tap down to one of them and lose it. I want to see some good, strong centre clearances, and hopefully we don't have Lee Matthews commentating this game and just talking about how overrated ruck taps are, because I'm sick of hearing it every week.
Oh, well, that speaking of which, that was one of the blessings that we do get a lot of games on Fox, because listening to him and Basil and Dennis last week was infuriating to say the least.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see the way, if they do try and make any changes. All use has obviously been the thing they've been talking about a lot this week, Seppo. And I reckon in that first, when we played the last home game we played, and we sort of only just managed to get over the line against
Collingwood?
Brisbane, when we played Brisbane before the rain came.
Yeah.
And the ball use was in the first quarter. They seemed to go back to that. In the first 10, 12 minutes, they were going back to the style they played early in the year. And the ball movement was quick. They weren't thinking about it. They were running to the right spots. Taberner was providing a pretty good lead at times and took 2 or 3 marks early. And then the rain came and we just sort of fell apart. And then we sort of got better towards the second, like once the rain disappeared in the last quarter, we went back to that style. And you thought last week in that last quarter, give us a good impetus for this week, but unfortunately it fell in a big heap. So it was certainly interesting to see how Freo go, because Carlton actually do have some pretty good clearance players in there. They've got some pretty big players with the likes of Tom Bell, Cripps, as you mentioned earlier. So they do. I mean, Murphy's a small guy in Curnow, but Curno's sort of in and under player. So they've got a pretty good sort of blend of pace and appearances. They just don't have enough experience or good ball users across the whole 22, which is sort of, so they can stay in games for periods, but then they just sort of fall away at times, and that's going to probably hurt them in this one as well, you'd think.
Yeah.
All right. Luke Farmer, Dalgleish and Chris Cameron's umpiring the game this week, so hopefully we'll just see them non-existent in the game, and we can just watch the footy and not have to worry about any umpiring decisions. Or anything.
Farmer's the only one I'm worried about those. The other guys are usually Comlins and Dalgleish are nondescript umpires, so I usually don't care when I hear those names mentioned, but yeah.
So we'll see what happens. What's your tip for this game, Seppo?
I was just going to consult the squiggle to see what it said. I know it said we're going to be close to Hawthorn, and I did sort of predict a close loss last week, but not from what happened there. And I know that we've taken a really defensive dip, so I'm just hoping we can do better than the predicted 98 to 53 scoreline here. So I want us to get over 100 points and get a bit of that attacking flair back and pile it on. So I'm going to go for a 10-goal, get the 60-point win over Carlton.
A lot of the media this week in Perth, Seppo, particularly with the players on the news and stuff like that, is talking about getting back to their best. And I suppose we've been hearing that rhetoric for the last 4 to 5 weeks since they've been in that bit of slump. So last week was sort of crash, bottom of the pack. So it really is time for them to sort of turn that sort of tide around. And it's hard for those guys, you would imagine, because once you get out to that 9, 10 and 1 record, or 11 and 1, or 12 and 1, whatever we were, Seppo, they know they're playing finals, and you're just wanting to, sometimes you're going through the motions, and it's not whether you want to get injured or you don't want to lose your spot or anything like that. And sometimes you just drop that 5%, and teams all of a sudden start improving, and they're starting to scout us a little bit better. And I think it's just a combination of things. So I think hopefully this week we'll come out and get back to our best, and I think we should win by about around 50 points. I think would be a comfortable margin this week.
Do you think you'd be upset if we managed to scrape him with a 20 point win, low margin, if they Carlton clog it up and play an ultra defensive game? I know Barker's a new coach there, he's trying to show something, so hopefully the players wanted to take more risks, and we put them under pressure and turn it over and get a lot more goals from turning it over and pile it on. But are you going to be unhappy with a low scoring affair and just getting the 4 points, or would you want to see something big?
I think it's the way we play. Sometimes you don't mind a low scoring affair if you're doing everything right.
Yep.
And sometimes you've got to play to those conditions. And if Carlton are going to clog the back line, it's going to be certainly a much more difficult area. But at the same time, that means we should be able to move all of our players forward a lot further, Seppo. So if our pressure is good, we should be getting turnovers in that. Instead of getting the turnovers at the back half, we should be getting turnovers in the forward half, and then utilising those players like Hill, like Pearce outside, even kicking goals outside 50. So I'd be disappointed if they don't play Taverner for the whole game this week. That's one thing I would like to see. I think we have to work on what our structure is going to be going forward in the finals, and whether we like it or not, Taverner has to play, I think. And,
yeah, definitely.
And I think it's no good playing him for 3/4 and then subbing him out. I think you've got to play him the whole game, give him 4 quarters, regardless of how we're travelling, and whether we take out a Steuben or a De Boer or whatever it might be, depending on who they use as the sub. I think we have to leave Pavlich and Taverner to play together, just get that chemistry right, and especially, like last week we had Clark come in, now we've got Griffin come in. We just never seem to be getting the same 6 blokes, and I think if they can get even Griffin just coming in, Seppo, and just able to bring the ball to ground, because we just need to get Ballantyne back on putting scoreboard pressure on. It's all good and well doing the stuff around the ground and doing the defensive pressure and that, but at the end of the day, he is a forward and you do have to kick goals, and I know he didn't get a lot of it down forward last week, but the reality is he does need to get scoreboard pressure as well.
Yeah, like that good patch of form that Walters had. I know Walters only kicked 1 on the weekend, but I think for what Walters was doing a couple of weeks ago is where Ballantyne needs to get to. And while we're on the subject, I want to wish a happy birthday to Ballantyne. It's his birthday today, so hopefully he can carry that extra age of experience now he's got, bring it into the weekend's game. And he always seems to play better at home than he does away, so he's got no excuses now. And I know there's a lot of people calling for his dropping and saying that he needs a spell on the Magoos, but I think you just got to back him in and maybe tell him to adjust his game. Maybe he's gone too far into his shell and worried about another suspension, but I think he needs to go hard and back himself and take off and even start to ping him a bit more, because we certainly want to increase our scoring output to get some confidence and even get some credibility back, because I think we've sort of lost them from a bit, and it doesn't mean much. We're not really pushing for the plaudits and the media, trying to get some attention. So it's good that they've come off us a bit, and the load is starting to change around a bit, and a lot more focus is going on our crosstown rivals and everything. But let's just hope that we get the result, and maybe Collingwood could do a favours this weekend and knock off the birds down the road.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about Ballantyne as well, Seppo, is he's just gone away from that front and square. A lot of the goals he was kicking were front and square or kicking over the back, and we certainly haven't had the ball movement to get those over the back goals. In the past, we'd just be able to bring the ball to ground, and it'd always be front and square, and even if he's getting the ball out, but he just doesn't seem to be getting into those positions as well as he was in the past. So it'd be good to see him get back to that sort of dangerous player in the forward 50, and getting a couple of goals this week would certainly give him a bit of confidence, that's for sure.
Yeah, it certainly will.
All right, anything you want to bring up on the boards this week, Seppo, or anything for our listeners?
No, other than the fact that anyone that's in Melbourne that wants to join the grudge match, the annual event, we've discussed it many times on the board over the last couple of years. We're going to be kicking off with a couple of training sessions through and trying to get some squads together. So if you're in Melbourne and do listen to this podcast and you can kick a footy around, keep an eye out for the board, and or if you're a returning member of the squad, keep an eye out for the emails and all the info floating out, because that will be the prequel to the Derby, and it's not far away. I think we play off the Eagles in around 18 or 19, I believe. So yeah, not far to go before we face off in that big moment. But
all right, excellent, and another couple of few weeks of sore bodies, Seppo, after training in the game, no doubt.
Yeah, always is the case.
All right, thanks again for joining us this week, Seppo.
No worries, always a pleasure to talk footy, and let's hope we're talking about another couple of wins under our belt in the next few weeks.
And certainly a more positive performance than what we've seen in the last 5 to 6 weeks. Good luck to Griffin, who's making his sort of season debut this week, and let's look forward to a much better performance. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.